There is a gap in human history. 295,000 years where people lived, built, believed, and died, and left no written record. We used to call that gap prehistory. We used to call it primitive. We were wrong. This is civilizations before writing.
9,000 years ago, in what is now Jordan, someone built something and then buried it. Not because it was trash, but because it mattered. This is Ain Ghazal, and nobody fully understands what they found there.
In 1974, construction workers building a highway outside Amman, Jordan, cut into a hillside and exposed the edge of something nobody expected to find, a city 9,000 years old. They called it Ain Ghazal. In Arabic, it means Spring of the Gazelle. At its peak, it held somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 people, making it one of the largest known settlements in the entire Near East during that era, 3 to 4 times the size of Jericho at the same moment in time. One archaeologist called it the Manhattan of the Neolithic, and it had been sitting under a modern road. Ain Ghazal sits on a hillside at the edge of modern Amman, near the point where the Seal Amman stream meets the Zarqa River. In the Neolithic, this was a fertile zone between Oak Park woodland to the west and open steppe to the east, a good place to build. The site was occupied from around 7250 BCE to roughly 5000 BCE. That is over 2,000 years of continuous use. The people who lived there were not nomads passing through. They built rectangular multi-room houses from stone and plaster. They plastered their floors. They buried their dead beneath the ground, inside the settlement, sometimes under the floors of the same houses they lived in. They farmed wheat, barley, lentils, chickpeas. They herded goats. They hunted gazelle and deer. They traded. Bitumen from the Dead Sea appears at the site, along with materials from outside the immediate region, which tells us they were connected to a broader network. These were not primitive people scrambling to survive. They were organized. They were building something. Before we get to the statues, we need to talk about the skulls. Archaeologists at Ain Ghazal uncovered 6 plastered human skulls. This was not unique to Ain Ghazal. Plastered skulls have been found at other sites in the region, including Jericho, going back even further into the 8th millennium BCE. It appears to have been a widespread practice across this part of the ancient Levant. Here is what was done. After a person died, the skull was separated, the lower jaw removed. The remaining skull was then covered with lime plaster, and the features, forehead, brows, nose, mouth, chin, were carefully modeled back into something that looked like a face. In some cases, eyes were recreated using shell or paint. These were not trophies. The attention to individual features suggests something more deliberate, some kind of relationship with the dead person being maintained. What that relationship was and what these skulls were used for, ritual, ceremony, ancestor veneration, archaeologists debate. What is not debated is that the people of Ain Ghazal were doing something intentional with the faces of their dead, something that cost time and effort and care. In 1983, archaeologists working at Ain Ghazal spotted something at the edge of a cross-section of soil cut by a bulldozer. About 2.5 meters underground, 8 feet down, there was a pit, and in the pit were statues. The excavation was led by archaeologist Gary Rolofson. What they found shocked the field. The first cache contained 25 pieces, full standing figures and busts. They were made from bundled reeds and twigs wrapped and layered in lime plaster. The faces had been given wide, staring eyes, white plaster with pupils made of bitumen brought from the Dead Sea. The figures ranged from about 35 centimeters to roughly a meter in height. Some figures bore traces of painted clothing or body paint. Some figures had what appeared to be arms, withered and small, positioned against the torso. Radiocarbon dating placed them at approximately 6750 BCE. The 1983 cache was carefully removed and sent to the Institute of Archaeology in London for conservation. 2 years later, in 1985, a second cache was found. This one was transported in one piece, the entire pit block-lifted and shipped to the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, where it was excavated under laboratory conditions. The second cache added another 7 statues and a single head. But the second group was different from the first in notable ways. The faces were more angular, the eyes more exaggerated, and several of the torsos had been deliberately made wide enough to carry 2 heads, 2-headed busts. The first cache had none. The 2 caches are dated roughly 200 years apart. Someone made these statues, and then 2 centuries later, someone else, or perhaps descendants, made more, different but related. In total, 32 figures, buried in pits beneath the floors of abandoned houses, oriented roughly east to west, carefully laid in. They were not thrown away, they were placed.
So here's what's wild to me. These people, 9,000 years ago, 9,000 years ago, they're working lime plaster onto human skulls to keep the faces of the dead looking like faces. And then a few hundred years later, they start building full-size human figurines out of the same material. And they buried those too. Whatever they believed in had to do something with holding on.
Here is the honest state of what we know. Academic researchers have put forward 3 main interpretations of Ain Ghazal's statues. They may represent ancestors, an extension of the plastered skull tradition, transforming the practice of honoring the dead into something more permanent and elaborate. They may represent deities or supernatural figures, beings that existed somewhere outside the human world. Or they may have been ritual objects in a more active sense, created for a ceremony, used in some way, and then deliberately retired, buried as part of the ritual itself. The fact that they were buried so shortly after being made, possibly almost immediately, is one of the most puzzling details. Some researchers have suggested they may have been made with the intention of burying them, as if the making and the burying were both part of the same act. None of these interpretations is settled. The 2-headed figures add another layer of uncertainty. No one has a convincing explanation for what 2 heads signified to the people who made them. What can be said is this: the statues fit into a pattern visible across the broader ancient Levant during this period. Similar figures have been found at other sites. Similar symbolic systems appear to have been shared across a wide region. Ain Ghazal was not doing something entirely isolated. It was participating in something larger, a shared language of the dead or the sacred that we can see the outline of but cannot read. Ain Ghazal reached its peak around 7000 BCE. 3,000 to 4,000 people, houses, ritual buildings, trade connections, a functioning city in the highlands of Jordan. And then it collapsed. After around 6900 BCE, the population dropped by approximately 90%. Not a slow decline, a near evacuation. The cause appears to have been environmental degradation, and the evidence points to the community's own activity as a significant factor. Lime plaster production, which the people of Ain Ghazal used extensively for floors, for walls, for statues, for skulls, requires burning enormous quantities of wood, thousands of trees. The forests around the site were cleared, not just for plaster production, but for agriculture, for fuel, for grazing land. The landscape that had made Ain Ghazal viable was consumed by Ain Ghazal. Combined with what appears to have been a significant drop in rainfall around this time, the land stopped supporting the population. Subsequent research found evidence that former inhabitants migrated into what is now the Black Desert, a landscape that, in Neolithic times, was wetter and more inhabitable than it is today. The city did not simply end. The people scattered. They took their knowledge with them and adapted. But the city itself was abandoned, and the land that had once fed thousands of people did not recover in any time frame that mattered to the people who left it.
What gets me about Ain Ghazal is the statues outlasted everything. The city's gone, the forest that fed it, gone. The people scattered, but those statues buried under the floor, they were still there 9,000 years later. Ain Ghazal, the spring of the Gazelle, the water's still there. The rest of it, well, we're still trying to figure it out. Until next time, keep an open mind.